All right, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Pooch Kick podcast.
Pooch kick.
Pooch Kick. Today we are going to be talking about the NFC West still. But today we're going to be talking about
breaking down positions within the NFC West. Who's got the best? Who's got the worst?
There we go. Yeah. So today we're going to be breaking down positions in the NFC West. Me and Sam look like we are pretty much in disagreement here, so it'll be a fun show.
Well, we're both complete ignorant people, so this is all subjective. I'm just kidding. This is all objective. What I speak is fact.
It's big facts. It's from the mouth of God himself.
We got to be careful with those big facts. BDGE is going to come after us for saying big facts.
Are you ready?
Oh, yeah. Let's hit it.
All right. Let's just jump right in. Let's talk about quarterbacks. With these rankings, we're going to be ranking each team based on their core that we're talking about. So, as an example, we're judging the teams on their entire wide receiving core, not their top wide receiver, not their bottom one, but their entire core. But a little exception is the quarterback. So, where do you have quarterbacks lie?
Well, this is pretty easy. This is like AFC West is a pretty easy division, I think, to break down at QB. Number one is, of course, Jared Goff. LA Rams. He's multi-time champ. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant Russell Wilson with the Seattle Seahawks. The number three, he's the master of disaster, evader. I can't come up with titles here. It's Russell Wilson. It's easy.
I agree. I think it's undoubtedly Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has had the track record to be number one in this division for the past 3 years. So I think it's no question that it's Russell Wilson at number one, and we are actually in all agreement on I think this one category. That we have Jimmy Garoppolo at number two. I don't think that's any question. Jimmy G got to a Super Bowl and his only
he might not be
second full year starting.
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed feelings. It feels like on Jimmy G. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Deshaun Watson. He's not Russell Wilson. And people seem to think that I feel like that makes him a negative, that he's not. Where if you don't have this top 10 quarterback, he does a really good job. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he actually did for them last year, during a big part of the season when they were dealing with a lot of offensive injuries. Kittle was out for time. Tevin Coleman, like every running back was taking a turn being out. Receivers weren't working. In particular, Dante Pettis ended up being a fluke. They had to bring Emmanuel Sanders in. So learning a new receiver. And they won a good chunk of those games because Jimmy G is smart. There's a reason New England kept him for as long as they did, and there's a reason that New England tried to keep him, why Belichick tried to trade Brady instead of him. He's talented and he's smart. He's not Tom Brady, but he's a great quarterback in the NFL. And I mean, you look at the stats in the Super Bowl, him and Mahomes had almost similar stat lines. So I think Jimmy G's not gotten a lot of the respect that Jimmy G deserves. And also, he's the most handsome quarterback in the league.
I wouldn't know if I would go that far, but he's a handsome guy.
Hey man, he's the handsomest.
I don't know if he's as handsome as
Don't know. It's porn star Jimmy. He's the handsomest. That's all there is to be.
All right, let's move on to number three. We both have Kyler Murray coming in above a Super Bowl appearing Jared Goff. Why is that?
So this kind of spits in the face. I talked about it with the AFC West, and it's a rule I kind of try and stick by for the most part, is that I don't want to put somebody who I've seen in the league for 1 year starting, or maybe 2 years starting, like 3 years at quarterback. In this case, though, it's not as much Kyler Murray is better than Jared Goff as much as Jared Goff is worse than Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray showed a lot of flashes. He showed some really smart stuff. He adapted really quickly in the league. You can go back through his film. I think it's Brett Coleman or Strong Opinion Sports. That might not be the name of the channel, but one of them talked about Kyler Murray and did a really good in-depth analysis. So if you're ever curious about Kyler Murray, that's a really fun video to go watch. But he adapted really quickly in games to these things, which is something Jared Goff has not been able to do. There have been reports, talking about that defense figured out when the mics and the helmets click off. If you waited to do your defensive formation, Sean McVay couldn't tell Goff what to look for in the defense, and so you started seeing more picks and incompletions out of him. I mean, Goff threw for 4,500 yards last season. He's got a really talented arm, but he's just mental understanding of the game at times to me is really questionable. And that's for me what put Kyler Murray here, kind of breaking that my big rule about, not putting quarterbacks above people that I know. Because Goff, I mean, look, at the end of the day, Goff has won games. He got to a Super Bowl. So he has talent as an athlete, but it's that mental check that I think Kyler Murray has, a big check where Jared Goff does not seem to have it. And that's not to say Jared Goff can't develop that. And maybe, here in the next year or two, he gets, big brain game and just starts, tearing people apart. But, was this 4 years in the league now? 4 or 5 years, and development just seems slower, and so I have my questions about it.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see Jared Goff being as effective of a quarterback as he used to be, and that point that you bring up about him not being able to read defenses and the defenses learning about the 15 seconds before the play, that if you just wait that tiny bit more, that you can get him. I think it's kind of sad that an NFL quarterback could be read so well. But he still does put up the numbers. It was like 4,600 some odd yards and about 28 touchdowns, I believe, for Goff last year. I know Kyler Murray didn't put up those exact numbers, but I do believe that Kyler Murray is in a place now that will allow him to potentially put up those numbers in the future, especially with the wide receivers he's getting now. I think DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk are great weapons for a young quarterback to really learn from as to what the wide receivers really need out of their quarterback. And I think Kyler Murray's just a better fit for his team than Jared Goff is for his. So that's why I have him at 3 and Goff at 4.
Yeah, so just real quick with Goff, and here's kind of the final, I think, nail bite that demonstrates things. The year they made the Super Bowl, if I remember, that's 2018, correct? I'm not huffing paint. Yeah. So he threw for 4,688 yards, 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He had a passer rating of 101.1 with a 64.9 completion percentage. Yep. The next year, when the defense was worse and Todd Gurley was not healthy, which was a huge factor, and they didn't have that monster-headed 3 receiver core, and people had film on him, he had a 62.9% completion with 4,638 yards. But here's the kicker. 22 touchdowns and 16 interceptions with an 86.5 completion percentage rating. Or overall rating QB. That's not good. That's 4 more interceptions, 10 less touchdowns. So that right there is what I'm talking about. That, like, you can study him and figure him out, and it's not hard to pick him apart.
Yeah. I think that for the past 2 seasons, we've been really looking at Goff to really – I would say we've been looking at Goff to show us that he deserved to be in that Super Bowl, and it wasn't really his defense that brought him there. But truly in the past couple of seasons, we've seen that it was the defense that brought him there. And, he did have a part in it. And, he made some big plays, especially against Kansas City that year. In the game of the year, that was such a game to watch. It was beautiful. But overall, I just think at this point in time, Kyler Murray is above him.
Yeah.
Moving on to wide receivers, though. So this is the whole wide receiving core we're going to be breaking down. This is where we start to differ a little bit. I'm going to start off. I have my number 1 wide receiving core, actually the same as Sam's. We both have Arizona. I have Arizona only for the fact that I view them as one of the more up-and-coming wide receiving cores in the NFC West. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins is, I would say, as close to a godsend as you can get for Kyler Murray. Him and Larry Fitzgerald on the same wide receiving core, mentoring this young quarterback that they have seen so many quarterbacks go through each of their systems. Hopkins and Fitzgerald can vastly impact the development of Kyler Murray, and I think having DeAndre Hopkins as that middle of the field, throw it up and he can catch anything. Replacement for Fitzgerald, and maybe have Fitzgerald in the slot, and then Christian Kirk as well on the outside. I think that's such a good wide receiving core, a solid wide receiving core for such a young quarterback and a mobile quarterback, that I had to put them at number one.
So I agree. Arizona up here, and I think that really the addition of Hopkins is what puts them here.
Yeah, it's
because
kind of
honestly, as much as I love Larry, Fitz is end of his career. Christian Kirk is an interesting player. He's definitely a wideout too.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me still wants to have the LA Rams here at one, because I think they field 2 wide receiver ones. But I think that the ability of the Cardinals to basically have what the Bills have as well here, they got all this offseason, is a 3-layered threat. You have somebody who can really tear apart DBs in the slot. You have Hopkins who can run either deep or middle of the field and tear up DBs there. And you have Christian Kirk who can streamline, just sprint down the deep and middle of the field as well. And that's just a 3-tone threat that is going to just be a huge problem.
Exactly. And I think, to go back on it, can you think of any other wide receiving core that has gone through as many quarterbacks as that receiving core has gone through with their respective teams? I think.
Are you talking about with DeAndre Hopkins and
DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, and Christian Kirk have all gone through quarterbacks?
Yeah, I guess they've had Sam Bradford in there, Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray, Larry Fitzgerald was there with a number of backup quarterbacks.
Carson
Palmer was down. He played with Kurt Warner. I mean, Larry's kind of hard because he's played for what feels like an eternity. But yeah, Hopkins.
Hopkins played with possibly
Glennon, Castle.
The worst group of quarterbacks ever to be assembled. For one wide receiver to get as many as good a stats as he has with those quarterbacks, he has to know a lot of things about how to deal with those quarterbacks. And
I think Cal Johnson might disagree with you with who's had the worst quarterbacks.
I just think that the amount of knowledge that DeAndre Hopkins and Larry Fitzgerald have to give Kyler Murray is immense, and that's why they're number one for me.
Yeah.
Moving down to number 2 is where we differ. I have Seattle's wide receiving core at number 2. You have the Rams. What's up with that?
Yeah, so I mean, Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp have both demonstrated an ability to be a number 1 wide receiver. Cooper Kupp had not wrong. Robert Woods in Buffalo was still a very good wide receiver. He's come here. He might not be the a big touchdown guy, but he's a huge consistent receiver. And we saw on the back half of last season, they kind of shifted more to Robert Woods as they moved to the 2 tight end sets. And Robert Woods was just tearing DBs apart. Cooper Kupp, although not as versatile as maybe somebody like Hopkins, you put him in the slot. I mean, he's probably the most dominant slot receiver I've seen in a good while. I think that he's better than Julian Edelman. He's better than a lot of these other guys. I mean, he over the first half of last year was an absolute unit, and I mean that's referencing a little bit of fantasy, but fantasy is sometimes representative of what you're doing in the real NFL. And Cooper Kupp was one of 3 receivers to finish with double-digit touchdowns. They lost Brandon Cooks in the offseason, but they drafted, I believe, Van Jefferson, who's an interesting pick. I believe they got him in the 2nd. I like him coming out of college, but I mean, you don't need much better than these 2 receivers, and they field some nice tight ends, which we'll get to later. And I think this wide receiver set, if Hopkins hadn't come over, this would be number 1 easily.
I see. This is where we disagree. I think you give. Listen, I like Cooper Kupp a lot. I just don't see him being a wide receiver 1. And the fact that you said that he is better than Julian Edelman, are you saying that
you don't see he has been for 2 years
or
now?
as of because him being better than Julian Edelman overall is a disgrace. I don't think that whatsoever. If you're talking maybe like right now at this current moment, I think he has a better setup than Julian Edelman does. But I think Julian Edelman is one of the best slot receivers of all time. And like his concentration on the ball is ridiculous. And it's not saying that Cooper Kupp is bad. Cooper Kupp is great. I'll draft Cooper Kupp every single year for fantasy. But what I won't do is put him over Seattle's rock star wide receiving core that they have been building. Seattle has Tyler Lockett, which has been a solid receiver for the past 3 years, where he has gotten those chunk plays. He's gotten those chunk plays that they needed heavily. Then they bring in last year the rookie DK Metcalf. This man gets swole as Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then goes out and dominates. I think that his upside is incredibly large. And with a quarterback like Russell, who can accurately pass so far down the field, it's kind of unfair to have him. And then you add Philip Dorsett. You add a wide receiver that can go into the flat, can go over the middle, can go deep. He's such a large threat for defenses. I think people are not going to be expecting him to do maybe as well in this system as in New England's, but I do believe that Philip Dorsett is going to have a big impact this year for Seattle, and that's why I have them over the Rams. I don't see the Rams. I don't see Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods making as big an impact for the Rams as I do DK, Lockett, and Philip Dorsett for the Seahawks, and that's why I put them ahead of them.
I think that you're maybe thinking Philip Dorsett is better than he is. I like Dorsett at the Seahawks. I think it's a fun Swiss Army knife weapon, but this team is still a run-heavy team. And I love DK. He emerged as a rookie, but like Robert Woods, if you're talking about twos, Robert Woods or DK, I mean, yeah, DK showed a lot of potential, but Robert Woods is consistently showing you what he can do. He can play with good, bad,
because he's been in the league for 3 years longer. I think that's an unfair comparison.
Yeah, but this is about what's a better core, and you're not talking about upside. You're talking about what we know they can do. And I'm willing to. I'm telling you right now, this LA receiving core slaps. This receiving core has proven 2 years in a row now. And this also Cooper Kupp put up this year's number off a torn ACL. He came back from a torn ACL and shredded the league. That's like Iron Man ability.
People have done that before. Adrian Peterson came up from an ACL and won an MVP. So it's not as impressive anymore as it used to be.
No, okay. Adrian Peterson was a legitimate Olympian after that. And I mean that in like the like Greco-Roman sense of like a god, not like an Olympian like in the Olympics. But like, look, you can tell me right now that I love DK Metcalf. I think DK Metcalf is going to be a great receiver in the coming years. He reminds me of Dez Bryant. I have a lot of fond memories of Dez Bryant. He might not be the fastest, but he'll body people out. That being said, he can't run as many routes. He's not a huge versatile weapon. He landed in literally one of the best spots from a quarterback that can use him well. But you look at the Rams, they have two wide receivers. Robert Woods can play anywhere on the field. And granted, Cooper Kupp's not as great when you put him on the outside. He's more of a slot receiver. But he can still do good work on the outside. And I think that the Rams field a better receiving core here with these two.
See, yeah, this is where we truly differ, because I don't even have the Rams as my number 3. I have
this
the Rams
is where you're at. 4. Look, I can understand.
I don't respect LA's receiving core as I do the other 3. That's what it comes down to. Is I don't see them putting up as maybe they'll put up the same numbers just because they have no running back really in LA now, so all they're gonna have to do is pass the ball. But I do believe overall San Francisco's wide receiving core
this is where you're insane.
Was a thing that got them to the Super Bowl, and that might be a hot take, but their wide receiving core is what won them games.
You're insane.
Except for the NFC Championship game, the wide receiving core had to make big plays in order to seal the deal for a lot of those wins. And the fact that Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are going to be on the same team is ridiculous to me. I think that, Kendrick Bourne is an okay wide receiver too. He had some
Oh my god, I can't believe what I'm hearing right now.
I think Kendrick Bourne is an okay number 2. I don't think he's anything that's like super special. It is kind of cool though. He's out of Eastern Washington, NC2A guy, but I just see the San Francisco 49ers wide receiver core as more impactful than the LA Rams wide receiver core this year.
I want to know what drugs you're on because I want them as well. Because look, I am a ginormous Deebo Samuel fan. I believed in him coming out of college. I absolutely love him. He is a versatile Swiss Army knife player. He can run. He can catch. He is amazing. I love him. Brandon Ayuk looks really interesting. But there is no way in hell you can sit here and tell me that San Francisco Fields the third best. Look, I'll give you that Seattle potentially you could make an argument that they have a better receiving core than Rams. I don't believe it, but I can hear that argument. What I cannot hear is a team that had 0,000-yard wide receivers. Kittle was the only player in this team, I believe, that went over 1,000 yards as a receiver. George Kittle, who is arguably the best tight end, if not the first, he is second with no competition there. Like, this team is not a team that throws the ball. They run the ball. That's what they did. They have a committee. That's what Kyle Shanahan wanted to do. That's what they did on people. It's only when their running backs were all hurt that they moved to throwing, or when they played incredibly tough games when they had to throw. Like, this receiving core is not better than LA. Deebo Samuel is not better than Robert Woods, at least now. Maybe
yes,
in like 3 or 4
years. Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
He didn't even break 900 yards. He had 802 with 57 receptions on 3 touchdowns receiving.
No one else is there to get it.
There are other people there.
No one else is there. That's it. He was
Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee,
receiver, number 4 receiver at best.
Had
up to 2.
Other running
what does that say? Like, I understand his production has gone up, but it's been out of necessity and not out of like true.
Robert Woods was a wide receiver one in Buffalo.
True like I understand he was like he may have had these like he had the 1,000-yard season last year. I'll give you that. But how many touchdowns did he have?
He had 2. He's never been a big touchdown person.
Touchdowns.
Deebo had 3.
Deebo had a bigger impact on his team winning.
Deebo was the wide receiver 1 for his team by the end of the year, which was out of necessity. And Kittle is arguably the number 1 pass catcher. Like,
I'm just gonna have to put San Francisco's wide receiving core above.
Hold on, you're gonna tell me that Deebo is Deebo Samuel is their wide receiver 1.
Okay.
Deebo Samuel is not better than Cooper Kupp.
I think he is.
I think you're smoking crack.
I think Cooper Kupp's really good. I just think Deebo Samuel is amazing.
Mind. I love Deebo.
Then why don't you back it?
I would buy a Deebo jersey. His last name is Samuels. My first name is Samuel. Connections there. I love this guy. I loved him coming out of college. I slapped that button. I said, this guy's going to be good.
And he was.
He had a good rookie season. He's more of a hybrid player than he is a actual dominant wide receiver. And this is about wide receivers. This is about your receiving ability.
All right. Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to change my opinion on this one. I just don't know.
He first off has a broken foot right now, so he's probably not playing till week 1 or 2.
We'll see.
And Brandon Ayuk's a rookie. I mean, if you compare these 1 and 2, there's no way in heck that you can tell me Kendrick Bourne is as good, if even remotely near the same ability as Robert Woods.
Listen, I think this is where it's close, but I'm gonna have to put San Francisco above it. I think they'll have a bigger impact. And I think they'll be better because
if Arizona didn't have Hopkins, it would be close between Arizona and San Francisco.
We will see. I'm gonna put it in as a San Fran over LA. That's what's gonna happen.
Insane. I hope that people harass you on Twitter for this.
I hope they
friendly harass. I don't want people threatening you or anything. I want friendly harassment. You're stupid. All right.
We're not running back course.
At least we agree.
Heated debate over wide receivers.
At least we agree a bit on this.
All right. So this we agree a little bit better.
Actually, I might. So I'm actually almost completely in agreement with you, other than one factor.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. We're going to be talking about the running back cores for the NFC West. Who do you have as number 1?
So I have San Francisco.
Okay.
Although So I'm actually in kind of conflict here because I think Arizona, Seattle, and San Francisco all field pretty similar talented backfields. I have San Francisco number 1 because I think that Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, I don't even want to say Raheem Mostert's name.
Why is that?
Because I think that Raheem Mostert, I think that this offensive line does more for these running backs than anything. You know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to move San Francisco down. I'm going to move Seattle Seahawks to number 1.
That's the wrong decision, man. I think
San Francisco has a better run game total, but I think that I'm stuck in this conflict. I don't know if I want to move.
I want to know what drugs you're on if you're going to move San Francisco's running backs from the top spot.
Chris Carson,
they're four of Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman, and Jerick McKinnon.
Jerick McKinnon wasn't played in 2 years.
It doesn't matter. He's still their third string back, and he was going to be their starter when he came into the league.
That's great. He hasn't played in 2 years.
It doesn't matter. It is about the committee.
That does matter.
It is about the committee.
Seriously does matter.
And the fact that you have Arizona over Seattle kind of worries me because who does Arizona have?
Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, but they play games. Hold on, I'm going to get into this here real quick. The reason I have Seattle at 3 is because their running backs routinely don't finish the season. And there's only so much talent does. Chris Carson is an immensely talented running back. He's very good. Other than the fumbles at times, it's very good. Rashad Penny looked really good last year as he developed. He got hurt. DJ Dallas is an interesting player. I love him just because of like namesake. I think he's fun. And
he's not even their third though. Carlos Hyde is the third.
Yeah, and Carlos Hyde is a veteran who comes in. I like Carlos Hyde. That being said, like routinely they don't finish the season. Like routinely they don't. And that's a big problem to me is if you're running back core, and that's why so my problem here is I think that Seattle and San Francisco field in theory more talented backfields than what Arizona does. Arizona's backfield doesn't routinely have injury problems with these players. Chase Edmonds looked really nice at times last year. Kenyon Drake showed huge flashes last year. Although when you look at his game-by-game basis for his stats, he was terrible in a vast majority of games, and then he'd have like these games with 100+ yards. So, I mean, I don't know what to do here. I actually think that these are all relatively similar with the exception of the Rams.
I think the only close battle is going to be the Niners and the Seahawks, just because their committees are both good. I have San Fran only edging out Seattle. I don't think that it's going to be like a runaway that they have the best running game, but I think that's a good point that you make that Seattle's running backs don't usually make it to the end of the season because they're rode very hard on that offense. But to put Arizona with Kenyon Drake, who you said on the last show was lightning in a bottle and that he would splash when he could, but I don't see him and Chase Edmonds putting together a running attack that's better than Seattle Seahawks. I don't. I think
I'll agree.
In agreement that the LA Rams have the worst running back committee here, has at number 4. But I would say, I would say it would go 49ers, Seattle, Arizona, LA for me.
So I'm actually gonna move mine around. I'm gonna agree with you.
Wow.
Although I'm really tempted to put Seattle above San Francisco because with Matt Breida gone, I think Matt Breida was a little undersold on how important at times he was.
Yeah, I agree.
I really like Seattle's backfield. I really like Chris Carson. I don't think Chris Carson always gets the respect he deserves because of the fumbles at times.
The fumbles and the injuries where he can't stay on the field.
Yeah, See, like, I want to view this from just a talent point. But if I view it from just a talent point, Tevin Coleman's also incredibly talented at times. It's been injuries, and Raheem Mostert is Raheem Mostert. There's a dime a dozen running backs with that career set. Just because he has a couple amazing games at the end of the year with a great O-line, a good team. I'm not buying the hype. He wants that contract. He wants a new contract. He asked for that trade. I think that was last week, but I'll keep it. I'll keep it with San Francisco at 1, Seattle at 2, Arizona at 3, and then I don't feel like the Rams need a ton of talking about why they're at 4.
We don't really need.
Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson looked bad last year. Cam Akers, I'm really excited about watching. I don't know how he's gonna do. I know a big argument's been that part of his lack of production at times in college was a poor offensive line. He's not coming to much of a better one in the NFL.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they're their offensive line went from being the staple of what they were all about to now being the according to Pro Football Focus, the 31st ranked offensive line in the league.
Yeah, so I mean it's interesting, and as I think I mentioned on yesterday, where I was talking about when we were talking about the season schedule, the Rams had a really good passing offensive line, but not. It was a bottom half run line, so I'm curious to see what Cam Akers does. I really like Cam Akers. I'm really interested to see what he does, but I don't believe in Malcolm Brown or Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on to tight ends. I don't think it's a problem here to put Arizona number 1 for tight ends.
If you can name me their tight end, starting tight end, I'll give you $1 without looking it up. Without looking it up. I have no idea.
I remember it was kind of kind of an odd one.
The guy I think you're talking about, Ricky Seals-Jones, is no longer there.
No. He has like a weird spelling to it. Yep. Okay. So I looked it up. It's Max Williams, but Max spelt with 2 X's.
Ooh, I like it. That's early 2000s #hardcore. That's something you'd see in like the Blade movies.
It is. My name's Max.
Yeah, 2 X's. Max. Mad Max with 2 X's.
All right. I don't think it's a problem here for both of us to say that San Francisco, I think, has the best tight end out of the entire group.
I think that there's a real argument about Kittle being better than Kelsey.
I agree.
I don't subscribe to it. I think Kelsey is better. I don't want people to like get mad at me here. But
I think there's definitely an argument though.
There is an argument, and I think here if Kittle continues to do what we've seen him do now, in another year or two, he will take over as Kelsey gets older and moves out. Like Mark Andrews, who I'm a huge fan of, in Baltimore, is probably who I think people would say is probably the 3rd best tight end currently going into this season. And the gap between him and Kittle is ginormous. So Kittle is phenomenally talented. I don't really want to spend too much time because I feel like people know this unless you really just hate San Francisco. He's phenomenal.
He's also the best guy on that team. Like human being wise, George Kittle is an awesome person.
Yeah, no, I was going to say he's a fantastically nice human being who just is a wonderful personality and who glows on that sideline.
Yeah, he does.
And then he makes DBs really mad because he absolutely destroys them. He's a great player.
Yeah. I don't have anything to disagree about.
Yeah, there's not much more there to it. I mean, it's like talking about Mahomes. Like, what do you say? This guy is a great player who, short of injuries, will be an incredibly talented tight end.
Yeah. Now moving on to number 2 is where we differ. This is where I struggled quite a bit to pick a number 2.
It gets ugly.
Yeah, I did choose Seattle. Their tight end core.
They're like 7 tight ends. It feels like.
Yeah. I did choose Seattle's tight end core over the Rams' tight end core. I think really only for one reason, and that's because Will Dissly. Will Dissly put on a show last year before he got injured, and Russell Wilson loves his tight ends. Absolutely loves his tight ends, and like I don't think any place in the NFL besides San Francisco, Baltimore, or Kansas City, I think no quarterback appreciates their tight end more than Russell Wilson does. The addition of Greg Olsen to the mix is going to be okay. I don't think he's going to be as impactful as obviously as he would have been earlier in his career, but having Greg Olsen, then Will Dissly, and then a standout Jacob Hollister last year. Jacob Hollister that took over the reins for a really tattered tight end group and really almost drove them to a number 1 seed in the NFC West last year, and it was about an inch away. But I think Jacob Hollister is a talent that should not be overlooked, and that's the edge I think over the Rams. I think the Rams at number 3 is it's more like a 2.5, only for the fact that Tyler Higbee is still putting up numbers, and so is Gerald Everett. They're both loved by Goff. They both get targeted by Goff quite a bit. I just don't see really anybody else behind them that really is special. Like Bryson Hopkins is their third. He's a rookie this year, so we'll see how he does. But I think for right now, my ranking of Seattle at number 2 over the Rams is going to have to stay, only for the fact that Russell loves his tight ends just a little bit more.
Yeah, so I do disagree with you. I think Seattle fields the third best tight end core here. And let me tell you, so I love Will Disley. I'm just talking about all the players I love today. So this is Jacob Hollister, who you're talking about, had on 41 receptions, 3 touchdowns, and 349 yards. Gerald Everett fielded 408 yards on 37 receptions and 2 touchdowns. So Gerald Everett on 4 less passes had more yards and 1 less touchdown. And then talking about Tyler Higbee, who exploded at the end of the year with 69 nice receptions, 700 and I gotta read my handwriting here, 34 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I mean, I think that Seattle has some decent tight ends. I really like the addition of Greg Olsen to help with just pass catching. I think that he really will help DK a lot more than people might think. Just with learning to kind of catch and how to run better routes. Greg Olsen is a phenomenal tight end who he's at the end of his career. He's playing, for same reason probably Jason Witten is just for Samoa, although one of them is actually good in the press box, as we found out with Greg Olsen. So, I mean, I think that this Rams tight end group is slightly more talented with a worse quarterback. And I think that's really what pushes them to 2 for me.
See, this is I disagree. For the fact that
you think Goff's better than Wilson?
No, Goff is nowhere close to Wilson. But what he has is what Wilson has is a way better tight end core. You can say that Jacob Hollister only got 41 receptions for 349 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's only 1 less touchdown than Gerald Everett got as a backup tight end.
Gerald Everett only had
Jacob
2.
Hollister was the third string until Will Dissly got hurt. And then Will Dissly, before he got hurt, I believe it was 6 or so games in, he got 4 touchdowns.
Yards, 23 receptions, and 4 touchdowns. Yeah, he was tearing it up in the end in the red zone.
And then you look at Tyler Higbee, their tight end 1, only got 3 touchdowns.
He did not emerge as a dominant tight end until the second half, though. Hold on, Hollister and not Everett, Higbee both kind of appeared in the second half of the season more after injuries to the primary tight end. So if you want to talk about Will Dissly to Gerald Everett, which is probably more comparable because they were the kind of tight end 1s. I mean, other than the touchdowns, Everett has 100. What is it? I gotta do math, which I'm terrible at, but 140 some more yards, 2 less touchdowns, and was 14 more receptions. So, I mean, yeah, but they also had other factors in the red zone in the Rams compared to what the Seahawks were fielding, where Will Dissly...
That is a lie! That is blasphemous. That is blasphemous. They had DK...
DK did not emerge till the second half of the season, really, as a main target. After Will Dissly went down, DK was getting a lot of those looks. You watch that the first 6 games, Will Dissly was getting a lot of the red zone looks while DK was still figuring out how to be a wide receiver in the NFL. Being a wide receiver, the NFL as a rookie, is probably hard as shit. And Tyler Lockett is not terrible in the end zone either. He can stretch his body out. My point is here, though, that I doubt, again, we're going to agree. But I look at the numbers that they put up, and that's at the end of the day. You look at what happened on the field, and you look at the numbers. The Rams tight ends were more impactful and more important to the team, and they looked better than the Seattle tight ends. I like Jacob Hollister. Totally I love Will Dissly as a person. Greg Olsen's a great signing, but Greg Olsen's at the end. Will Dissly hasn't played a full season, and Hollister, I think, is a dime a dozen tight end.
We will see. I think we're getting into semantics about who's more impactful where, but I think it'll prove this season that Seattle's tight end group is more relied upon than LA's is.
We'll come back around next year at this, and we'll see who's right here, and then of course Arizona at 4.
Max Williams.
That's probably just for blocking. All right, so moving on to the big old boys, the most boring spot for most people in football, the offensive lines. I'm gonna be honest. Outside of San Francisco, none of these three teams are really fielding great offensive lines.
Yeah. San
Like
Francisco had a middle of the road offensive line last year. Middle of the road, I would say middle of the road to good.
I'd say it's better than middle of the road, but it's not. It sits in good. It's not great. It's good. Joe Staley was a phenomenal player. Trent Williams comes in to replace him, which is imagine replacing a Hall of Famer with another potential Hall of Famer. Like how fun is that?
A nice fit. It is a nice fit, and I think they actually get a little bit better just because Joe Staley was getting a little bit
And he was a little slower, a little older. We'll see what Trent Williams looks like with I think a year off now. And not wanting to play with the Redskins. But moving on.
The what?
With DCFC. Shout out Pat McAfee.
Yeah, so let's just get into it.
I'm waiting on that name change. So I
we both have San Francisco at number 1.
Yeah,
but then it changes.
I put the Rams here at 2 solely because of Andrew Whitworth. They retained him to another contract. Andrew Whitworth is a phenomenal veteran offensive line player who can seriously help hold things together. They did have, according to Football Outsiders, the number 1 passing offensive line in the NFL in 2019 while fielding the 19th run. So it has problems, but I think in comparison to what the Seattle Seahawks and Cardinals had at 24 and 26 for pass and 16 and 22 for run, that's my sole edge, is that Andrew Whitworth is somebody reliable and trustworthy. I don't feel like there's that player on Seattle or Arizona to the same caliber.
Yeah.
So as a total unit, I'll give you that. Like I said, I don't think any of these three, and I think it's more semantics arguing here because I don't think any of these three are really worth like anything. Like this is 3 offensive lines that I would argue are middle of the road to bad.
Yeah. I think that pass protection. The Rams are the best. According to Football Outsiders, they are number 1 pass protection, and then San Francisco's at 15, and then you get really bad. Seattle's ranked 24th, and Arizona's ranked 26th for pass.
So Arizona fielded an absolute trash offensive line last year. They drafted who was it? I believe it's Josh Jones. Let me look here. Yeah, Josh Jones. I didn't look too much into him this year for that, but I mean that's a need. I still don't think it's that good of a unit. Seattle's it's been 8 years now. So
yeah.
I think the last time they had a decent O-line was with Max Unger. Yeah, I mean I feel like it's pulling teeth with these because like I said, I mean it's not like you have a Dallas Philadelphia argument or where you're talking about Pittsburgh and Baltimore or where does Indianapolis,
So I think after San Francisco and LA, with LA kind of barely making the cusp, I think Seattle and Arizona just kind of fall to 3 and 4 just because over the past 5 years they've just been absolute, like, I wouldn't say they were terrible, but they were just very not good. So I don't think it's anything. We actually have the same list here. It goes San Fran, LA. Seattle, Arizona. I think Arizona's ranked last just for the fact that they have to put up with maybe a mobile quarterback that is just going to put them through a lot more strain than a normal pocket passer would.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to D-line.
Big D. What was once the highlight of this division, fielding arguably 4 really talented defenses.
Yes.
It's weird to see where they are now.
Right?
But I mean, shoot, I remember them winning the Super Bowl. I was in high school, so things are different now. This is easy though. Defensive line.
Who's got number 1? I wonder who.
Is it maybe Nick Bosa and that 49ers pass rush? Is it maybe San Francisco? Because I feel like maybe it's San Francisco.
I think it's San Francisco. They're
Okay,
number
well, San
two.
Francisco.
They were number two last season on getting to the quarterback against pass protection. They were number two. It's pretty easy just to call them number one. Even on the run during even defending the run, they were middle of the road to good at 13th according to Football Outsiders, and so it's not a question who's number one here. I think where we get into a little bit of a controversy is where we rank the other ones. I think it's no question though that Seattle's last in this. Seattle's defensive line has been their Achilles heel for, I would say, the last 3 years or so. After losing Michael Bennett and losing some other key pieces, they've really kind of gone downhill. They've gotten some I wouldn't say no name guys, but some guys to come in and kind of just fill those positions as needed, but no big stars on the defensive line currently for the Seahawks.
Yeah, so I don't share that same opinion, Tally. I have them last right now just because Jadeveon Clowney, it appears, isn't wanting to re-sign, although I guess that is a chance, but for everything I've heard from reports, it sounds like that won't happen, and I think that's a huge loss. Would you put them
above Arizona?
Yes.
If they got Clowney, you would put them over Arizona?
Absolutely. I don't think Arizona fields an amazing pass rush at the defensive line unit. But without Clowney, I just don't see a unit here that's really going to do much. Now, this is where we disagree. It's talking about 2 and 3 here. Oh, maybe not. Are you seeing the wisdom?
After thinking about it, I was thinking about it this last night, that Arizona's defensive line is good. I think it's better than the Seahawks because they can really put pressure on teams. They were.
I think that has a lot to do with Chandler Jones. If we're being,
I think so as well.
Honest.
I think so as well. Their defensive line was ranked 16th for getting at the passer and 14th for run. So they're very middle of the road, but they're still good. They still can stop teams. I think what teams really tear them apart at is maybe their DBs. I think that sometimes the DBs can be a little old, but yeah, I still think their DBs are good.
Funny, you're talking about that the DBs are potentially the Arizona weakness.
Yeah.
Huh. Weird.
Huh.
But look, I mean, okay, to flip, Arizona fields a decent pass rush, but I'm curious about how much of that comes from Chandler Jones, the linebacker. But I mean, I think that you can't talk about these D linemen without talking about the best pass rusher in the NFL. The best, and he sits on the Rams, which is why they're at 2. Because this one-man machine is named Aaron Donald.
Single-handed, man.
By the way, I was just seeing a statistic. This is for Madden, but he already has been in the 99 club 4 times in Madden. That's the
wild.
3rd or 4th most of any player in Madden history. This man is a machine. I kind of thought that maybe Khalil Mack was right there with him. No. Khalil Mack's phenomenal, but no. This man, Aaron Donald, one of the nicest human beings I've ever seen off the field, destroys quarterbacks. If you consistently can catch Russell Wilson, you're a great pass catcher. If you consistently make Russell Wilson eat the turf, you're an amazing pass rusher. And Aaron Donald does it. Aaron Donald does it to everyone. If you don't double team this man, and it doesn't even work half the time when you double team him, he's getting to your QB. You best be hoping Lamar is sprinting out the O-line when Aaron Donald gets through the O-line. This man's a monster. And that's what puts it at 2. Is I look at Arizona, I look at Seattle, and I said, who here is going to really make the difference here at the defensive line unit? Now, Bobby Wagner and Chandler Jones both come up a lot, and they're both phenomenal linebackers.
Yeah.
And that's what I think gives these pass rushers a lot of ability. Now, they're both a little bit older, so that gets to problems. But that's where I kind of have it with San Francisco, LA, Arizona, Seattle. And if Jadeveon comes back, I would move Arizona down 1 and move Seattle to 3.
Okay.
Although I think Jadeveon is good, I'm going to side note this in. I think that people think Jadeveon is a lot better than he actually is. I think that
That's where
he's a good pass rusher who has great games. But in watching him now since he was in Houston, now to Seattle, have not seen anything to me that makes me think he's a great pass rusher.
Yeah, I think he is. I would say he's lightning in a bottle as well, just like Kenyon Drake.
So I don't fully agree with that. He feels like he plays like even like when he's not doing his games are still good. He still creates pressure, but he's not when he was drafted number 1 overall. That's people thought they were getting Aaron Donald out of this kid.
Yeah, and he gives I think he gives you an Aaron Donald performance, 3 times a year. I just don't think it's every game.
I think Khalil Mack is one of the only pass rushers that gives you a Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is light years better than any other defender in this league. I'll tell you that in terms of light years better is an exaggeration here. He's phenomenal. He's the best defender. He's arguably top 10, not even I say arguably top 5 best players in football currently.
Yeah.
Like I talk about Aaron Donald in the same way that you like people would talk about like Russell Wilson being one of the best quarterbacks. Aaron Donald is of a caliber of his own.
Yeah.
He is the Patrick Mahomes of defenders.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And
10
he single-handedly has made their defensive line the second best this year.
Yeah, I mean he's alone versus what is an amazing unit in San Francisco. And Aaron, it's fun. But let's move into something. I think this is going to be hot waters because I think that Bobby Wagner makes this interesting when we talk about linebackers. And I see that you have Seattle at 1. I have Arizona. And I had Arizona. So here's my problem with Bobby Wagner. And I say this, but before I say this, I want to say he is phenomenal. He is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, if not arguably the best currently. He is amazing. Okay. But I've always seen him struggle a little more on the back end of the field. Now, he has games where he plays well in the back end with the DB stuff. But and part of that could be that they've never really needed him to do that because of the DBs they had. But as he I don't see him as dominant back there. Now, he plays the middle and the front of the field phenomenally, but I see Chandler Jones' ability to play all levels of the field, and I think that to me makes it. And the drafting of Isaiah Simmons, who I think is going to be an absolute stud, I think to me makes Arizona's linebacking core better. Yeah. Now, I say that also because outside of Bobby Wagner, there's not much there to me in Seattle. It's really Bobby Wagner and then who's who.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it's just like a who's who. They still have KJ Wright, who is nothing to shake a tail feather at. And then
he's nowhere near what he was.
I would say that he's still making he's still making plays where he needs to make plays. I mean, I would say he's more of a middle of the road. He's more of a veteran linebacker that's there going to get you your 70 tackles a season. But I still think he's a solid linebacker that has been proven. See, this is where I think you got ahead of yourself with your rule where you said I'm not going to give a first year or a person who has only 1 year experience under their belt. I'm going to give them a rank just because I like them and their talent. And I think that's where you're getting ahead of yourself with Isaiah Simmons. We spoke about this before the recording, but what I think sets apart Seattle and Arizona in my mind for the linebacking core is proven ability versus what could happen. And I know Chandler Jones is in Arizona and he's always putting in work, but the fact that Bobby Wagner is the best linebacker in the NFL and that he has KJ Wright on his side, and then he also has some young guys that do show up every once in a while. It is kind of a group that's getting smaller and smaller by the year, but I still think that they have the best linebacking core in the division. Now, if Isaiah Simmons comes out and absolutely goes haywire and just balls out on these people, then yes, I think they move up to number 1. But I think it's proven versus clout, and I think that Seattle has more of a proven linebacker core than Arizona at the current moment. And then See, those are the only two that we differ here in the linebackers. I see that we both have San Francisco and the Rams at 3 and 4 respectively. I think San Francisco's linebacker core is the only part of their defense that is truly something that needs to be worked on. I would say sooner rather than later. Their linebacking core is good. It's a solid one that can still win them games.
It gets the job done.
Exactly. With Quan Alexander and Fred Warner, but I do think that they need some improving. And I think that Arizona still has the edge over him on that one. And then the Rams linebacking core is just taking a huge hit.
As I talked about,
they lost their last big weapon when they got rid of Corey Littleton. That was their last real vestige to the past.
That was a big loss for them. I really do believe that was a huge loss. So this team's ability to kind of move around in the middle of the field is gonna struggle this year. That's my firm belief. They have Donald and Ramsey, who are two very good defensive talents, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Do you want to move on to DBs?
Yeah. So this is where we seem to disagree quite a bit. Although it looks like you moved some things.
I did move some things around.
At number one,
we were having a conversation before the recording, and we were talking.
As we do.
Mainly about the defensive backs and how we were ranking them. I was thinking about this quite a bit last night. As I was going over my picks here, and I did have Arizona number one, only for the fact that I think Patrick Peterson is, I would say, one of the least respected cornerbacks that can punch you in the mouth with his gameplay.
He's been slept on, I think, in good parts of his career, mostly due to the fact that the Legion of Boom existed.
Yes. Adding the fact that he's pretty much their only cornerback of mention. Budda Baker is, I would say, one of the best free safeties in the league. He's especially one that gets slept on.
All right. One of the best free safeties in the league is a stretch. Look, Budda Baker is looking better each season. Look, he's a hometown boy, all right?
He was first in tackles last year.
Well, that's because they had a lot of people they needed to tackle.
First in tackles gives you a certain respect, especially as a cornerback, or I mean as a free safety.
Look, I like Budda Baker. I think Budda Baker's a talented player, but that's it for this unit. Is Patrick Peterson and Budda Baker, and Budda Baker. And Patrick Peterson is at the end of his career. He's older now. He's at the end of his career. He's slower than he used to be. He still shows flashes. Budda Baker looks good, but I'm not putting Budda Baker on the number ones.
Yeah.
He makes tackles in the open field. Look, you think Arizona was potentially the best. I have them as the worst.
Yeah, I understand that. It's your sentiment mainly about Patrick Peterson that drives you to that, and that's fine.
I love Patrick Peterson. I've always thought that Patrick Peterson was the best individual cornerback in this conference. Even when Legion of Boom was Sherman, I always thought Patrick Peterson was better than Sherman because Patrick Peterson would move the whole field and shadow ones the whole game, where Sherman plays sides of the field. And I mean, I have San Francisco at 3 for their DBs. Sherman's there, Jimmy Ward and Mosley are there, and I think it's a decent little backfield. I don't think it's stopping wide receiver ones or two. I mean, we saw them get burned a good amount of times last season.
Upon us, having our conversation before, I did move Seattle to number one. No pun intended here, but barring that Quentin Dunbar may actually see some jail time.
He might be robbing more than just the civilians.
Trey Flowers would move up to their right cornerback, and Trey
Flowers
is okay. He shows some flashes. He does get burned. He's the person that they do target more often than Shaquille Griffin on the other side. But you were right when you were saying that Quandre Diggs and Bradley McDougald have been solid players at their safety positions for the past year. Quandre Diggs coming over from getting him from Detroit. I think one of the biggest steals.
Not sure what Detroit did there.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure either.
I'll be
I
honest.
think
I have a
Detroit is
lot
really
of.
mismanaged with their DBs, and I don't know if maybe it was an
That's an
attitude
understatement.
problem in the locker room. Maybe he was getting mad and
Well, the
fed
team
up. I'm
cited, I
not
believe,
sure.
knee injuries. I believe the team cited his knee injury as why they were trading him, which is funny because I think he only missed one game for Seattle.
Yeah. And he got 3 interceptions his entire time in Seattle.
He helps round this. So Seattle might not have the best individual players, but this unit does a good job of helping one another. And the addition of Quandre Diggs is what moved this to 1. Like Quandre Diggs is a very good safety. Shaquille Griffin has continued to grow. I don't think that he's going to be a top DB, but you ask me, is he going to be like a B tier or an A tier DB? I think that he exists as a B tier. I think he could move to an A tier DB. I say this, of course, with the video game rankings, where S tier exists as the ultimate tier, which is where somebody like Jalen Ramsey, I think, exists, which is why. I mean, we're kind of jumping around a little bit here, but we both have Seattle at 1.
Your 2 is kind of, so we both have Seattle at 1, but your 2 is an odd choice for me.
Yeah, so I have the Rams at 2. Jalen Ramsey and I think Troy Hill showed flashes last year at times. I'm blanking on some of the other names.
I would say the only person on that defense besides Jalen Ramsey that deserves respect is Taylor Rapp. Taylor Rapp does everything.
Taylor Rapp is good. I think Jalen Ramsey is by and far better than anybody that is currently being fielded by the Niners or the Cardinals. And before people get mad about the Niners, we'll talk about this. That defensive back unit, you could see the games when the defensive line was not able to create the pressure they wanted. The same way that Philadelphia got burnt in games was those DBs were not keeping up in heavy throw games. I love Jimmy Ward. I think Jimmy Ward is a very good talent who's growing. I think Sherman is in a good spot for him. But these DBs get burned.
About San Francisco?
Yeah, this is why I have them at 3. And so Ramsey is in the prime of his career. I like Rapp. I like Hill. And Ramsey is what puts this at 2. Ramsey is phenomenal. Ramsey is one of the best corners in the game.
I think you're giving a lot more respect to Jalen Ramsey than I would say he deserves at this point, only for the fact that he's not an Aaron Donald. He cannot single-handedly push your DB rankings to number 2, in my opinion. I think he's a great DB. I will not disagree that he's a great DB, but I do not think that he single-handedly puts them at number 2 because Troy Hill and Taylor Rapp are good, but they are nowhere near the unit that San Francisco or Arizona have.
We completely disagree on Arizona. I'll give you that there's an argument about San Francisco, but I think that their success came from the fact that pass rush was arguably the number 1, number 2 pass rush in the NFL last year, in the same way that Philadelphia's DBs were given some comfort when.
Yeah, and that's why we both agree.
And that was one of the biggest. Yeah, so I mean, I don't believe that Arizona fields an amazing backfield. I think Budda Baker is talented. I think Patrick Peterson has been a phenomenal
talent. The number 1 tackler in the NFL. Patrick Peterson can still keep up with those number 1 wide receivers.
Sometimes. I watched him get burnt a few times last year. I mean, every DB is gonna get burnt. I think Budda Baker is a nice up and coming talent. I think that Patrick Peterson is a good
up-and-coming talent. He's the number 1 tackler in the NFL. How is that up and coming?
Because I still watch him get burnt. He doesn't cover people as well times. He can tackle well, and he moves well to stop people from moving the ball sometimes. But I see him get burnt on plays by receivers still. And look, you can disagree with me. That's fine. But I think Jalen Ramsey is one of the best DB or one of the best corners in the league. And I think the Rams field what is an all right DB unit.
I think the reason the Rams lose games is not because of their defensive line, but I think instead because of their DBs.
They lose games because of
because they get thrown on. That's why they lose games. They don't
which is why they got Jalen Ramsey.
Sure. But
that's why they moved to get Jalen Ramsey.
Even with Ramsey last year, they were getting thrown on like nobody's business.
So was Arizona.
I would still say that it's an overrating for Jalen Ramsey there.
All right. agree to disagree.
Shall we move on to coach?
Yeah. So, well, let's maybe cover, because I think we got a little confusing with arrange the defense over the defensive line. We both agree on San Francisco at 1, LA at 2, Arizona at 3, Seattle at 4. For linebackers, I have Arizona at 1. You have Seattle at 1. I have Seattle at 2. You have Arizona at 2. And then we agree San Francisco and the Rams. And as we just discussed with DBs, we both agree Seattle at 1. Then we disagree. I have LA at 2. You have Arizona at 2. San Francisco at 3. We both agree on. And then you have LA at 4, and I have Arizona at 4.
Yeah.
Just to give some clarity. But yeah, let's move to coaches. So the coach I have at 1, I don't think is the most talented coach here. I actually think he's the 3rd most talented coach, but I think his career has been incredibly successful and his team has been dominant. So I think you have to put Pete Carroll here at 1.
Yeah, I agree. It's only for the fact that it doesn't seem in any circumstances during a Seahawks game that they're completely out of it because of the coach that they have, in my opinion. I think that the things that he can pull out later in a game to just irk out a win has severely helped Russell Wilson, get that moniker of being the late game guy, that he will win on those fourth quarter drives. That has to do a lot in part to his head coach. And Pete Carroll is in his mid 60s, late 60s, so he probably won't be coaching for very a lot longer, but I do think that he's still the number 1 coach here in the NFC West.
Yeah,
and then we move on to number 2.
He's the oldest coach in the NFL currently.
I believe
which
he
is crazy
yes.
when you look at what Andy Reid looks like.
Right. But
yeah, so well, real quick before we move on, I just want to say I think what gives Pete Carroll the edge here is the fact that he has the Super Bowl win.
Yeah.
McVay and Kyle Shanahan have both failed to get that hump. So I think that's what kind of gives Pete Carroll. Then Pete Carroll's also the longest another coach has been here is 3 years. That's McVay and Shanahan have both been coaches now at their teams for 3 years, going into their 4th year. Cliff Kingsbury, this is his 2nd season. Like Pete Carroll's been there for what I want to say 12 years now.
Yeah, he got there 2010.
All right, so obviously
so we have Pete Carroll at 1. Where we differ is at number 2.
Yeah, and okay, so I feel like Shanahan is the new hotness. I have Shanahan at 3.
I have him at 2.
So I have McVay at 2.
I have McVay at 3.
I think McVay came onto the scene and torched the league, and so he became new hotness so fast that people forgot who his quarterback was. People didn't think of the fact that maybe the way the GM, and I don't know to the extent McVay constructed this team, potentially wasn't for the long haul. McVay in his 3 years as the Rams head coach, 11-5, which was a team pretty much he took over from Jeff Fisher, who I believe that team had gone like 7 wins the season before. And then the year they went to the Super Bowl, 13-3, which actually, fun fact, him and Kyle Shanahan both 13-3 the year they went to the Super Bowl. Both lost. Coincidence? I think not. But then he finished this last season at 9-7. They barely missed the playoffs. So he has not missed the play, and it's 3 seasons. So saying he hasn't missed the playoffs and hasn't actually to it. But I think Sean McVay kind of became new hotness, and then people got bored with it because he didn't win the Super Bowl. If he'd won the Super Bowl, him and Doug Peterson have really similar career archetypes to me thus far as head coaches. The difference was Doug Peterson won the Super Bowl against New England, and so people have kind of looked at, well, the team injuries and team personnel not being able to afford certain players is not as much Doug Peterson's fault, where McVay didn't win, so people view it as his fault. What we don't look at is how he's been able to adjust his team continuously with a quarterback that many would agree is a back half quarterback. He's been able to adjust. 9-7 wins with that broken of a roster is fairly impressive. Now, Shanahan has looked great as a head coach. He's only had 1 year with an actual healthy roster. His other 2 seasons, 6-10 and 4-12, I'll acknowledge there were a ton of injuries everywhere across the board.
Yeah.
And I think Shanahan is a very intelligent. He's one of the best young coaches. Him and McVay both represent, I think, 2 juggernaut coaches in the future. But I think that McVay has been kind of pushed to the side because of injuries and cap space problems that aren't as much his fault. And I look at them and I say, which one is more inventive? Which one kind of Am I more worried about week to week? And people might say this is crazy, but I'm more scared of McVay. Now, if
No,
you give
I understand
McVay
that.
personnel, well, I think part of the problem, and Shanahan, as I talked about, new hotness. He just 13-3, Niners, boom, he burst on the scene. His second Super Bowl, like he was great offensive coordinator. He's an amazing talent, and me saying that he's third is not trying to say that he's not a good head coach. He's an amazing head coach, and as I said, I would rather have Shanahan or McVay over Pete Carroll. I actually don't think Pete Carroll is a great play caller. I think he's a good personnel's coach. I think that Russell Wilson has done a lot for that team. I feel like I sound like Colin Cowherd saying that. But I just feel like with the resume, you got to put Pete at 1 here. But I love McVay. I continue to love him. I think the things that have been the problem with the team are not as much his fault. And I love Shanahan. I have Shanahan at 3, although I can understand where people would put Shanahan at 2.
Yeah, I would say that it's kind of an unfair metric in this sense, only for the fact that these 3 coaches would be in the top 10 coaches in the league if we were to rank all of them. Like we can put them, 1, 2, and 3 in here, and people can get upset about, maybe Shanahan being a little bit farther down on your list, or McVay being a little bit farther down on my list. There's still great coaches that all 3 of them would be in the top 10 of the entire league, hands down.
I don't know about top 10, but top 15 for sure, probably top 12.
I would say top 10. I think McVay and Shanahan, that decision for me came down to who has the better chance of winning this season. And I think that's what we should be looking forward to, is the predictions of this season, and maybe not exactly what they've done in the past, but what they have coming up. And what Shanahan has coming up is a lot more, I would say, has a lot more meat to it than what McVay does. McVay doesn't have obviously he does not have the weapons that he did. I think this year is going to be a rebuilding year for him. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be very pretty. I think he'll still, get to that 9-7 mark, but I think that Shanahan will still dominate. If not completely in the AFC West, I think or NFC West, I think in the NFC they'll still be a playoff team no matter what.
We agree completely on that. I obviously demonstrated that I think they're going to go 12-4, which they just lost the Super Bowl in what was a close game.
Close until the end.
Well, I mean, you're dealing with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and whatnot, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that there's a lot to love with both McVay, and Shanahan. I'll talk about. Shanahan's blown it open. He was with the Redskins, phenomenal offensive coordinator. He went to Atlanta, they made the Super Bowl, phenomenal offensive coordinator. He came to San Francisco, they had his first 2 years just injury everywhere, which allowed them to draft a lot of these players now that they're dominant with. I'm excited to see what he does with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. He has Jimmy G. I love Shanahan, and I'm very excited to see what Shanahan does. And a year from now, maybe Shanahan puts together another. If he puts together a 12-4 season, he might move ahead of McVay to me.
Yeah.
But I look at what I've seen them do in their careers, and I just really like McVay. I think people just sleep on him a lot, which is why I have him at 2.
But are we making predictions? Are we making predictions about the future of this upcoming season, or are we, gloating about the past? I think that's what it comes down to. I think
when it comes to coaches, you can't look at the future without looking at the past. Unlike any other position, coaches you have to look at everything they've done to look at their body of work moving forward, the same way you look at, for instance, like a senator. Like, what has the senator voted on in the past? Because it'll tell you a good indication of what they'll vote on in the future, where a quarterback might be more like a Supreme Court justice, where you don't know what they're going to do thing to thing. You have an idea, but they jump up and down. Look at Matt Ryan when they went to the Super Bowl. MVP was insane. Look at him now. I mean, where are they this? And I think that and I'll say, like I've said with Shanahan, there were a lot of injuries that aren't his. He cannot control. Here's part of the infuriating thing, I'm sure, being a coach. You can only control so much.
Yeah.
You have to put together the team. And one of the things that I think drives McVay crazy is he has Jared Goff. Now, I don't know how much he was in on paying Jared Goff. If he was heavily involved, I think that's insanity, and I'd move Shanahan to 2 on that alone. But
if McVay was involved in getting all that money to Goff,
no, that's insanity. And I think that's part of the problem is people look at like Goff and what the Rams struggle and say, oh, McVay's not as good a head coach as we thought. It's not like Matt Nagy, where I saw 1 year amazing play calling, and the next year I saw some really questionable play calling.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what he does. So I really think it comes down just to your opinion on McVay and Shanahan. I think that's really where it comes down to right here. I can't fault anybody for having love for either one of these guys, though.
Yeah.
And then
it was a hard toss up for me. It really just came down to the factor of who has the better chance of winning this year, and I think that's Shanahan. So that's the only metric that I judged it on, to like that I could judge it on, I should say, that would put Shanahan above McVay. And I think it's a more pressing issue.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. And like I've said, I think this comes out of more my love for McVay, and how I think that he's an absolute genius as opposed to.
Oh, he is. He's the next Bill Belichick if given the right team.
I don't think he's. I think he's more comparable to like Andy Reid.
Andy Reid's comparable to Bill Belichick. I think that's.
But Bill Belichick coaches.
It's not an apples and oranges thing. I think it's a definite like. I think McVay could be the next Belichick if given the right general manager, given the right owner, given the right given the right circumstances. I think McVay could be the next Bill Belichick.
All right, well, we'll see. I'm curious to see. We both agree here at 4, though.
Yeah, we both agree at 4, and it's not because Cliff Kingsbury is a bad coach. It's just because he's young and he didn't have the best season last year. But it was his first season with a young quarterback, rookie quarterback. It's gonna be a kind of a tough go for him, but he did okay.
So I'll be honest. I actually, when they hired him, I was not a fan. I super did not like that hire. I thought that he was going to flounder in the NFL. I was wrong in that regard. I'm curious to see year 2, his play calling and his coaching. Now they have Hopkins there. They have Kenyon Drake signed. They don't have to really deal with David Johnson's kind of issues. I'm really curious to see where he goes there. He was a much better head coach than I thought. Yeah. And I'll admit it. I was dead wrong about him. I was wrong about Kyler Murray as well. I didn't think Kyler Murray would be bad. I didn't think Kyler Murray would be this successful. I am still hesitant on him moving, as we kind of talked about earlier, moving that next step. But I'm really excited to see Cliff Kingsbury. He's seems to be very good at calling that offense. And I want to see him grow. But I don't think it's
Shanahan. Like Shanahan got a lot of opportunity at Washington to make some mistakes.
Being an offensive coordinator, I think, before a head coach is nice. I think it's harder for some of these guys that are college head coaches who then come to the NFL as a head coach.
Yeah.
Whereas like Shanahan was that offensive play caller for multiple teams before he got that head coaching deal. And I think it lets you work out some of the things you want. You can see what head coaches do that work and don't work. We've seen so many college coaches come in and fail at the NFL level. I mean, you talk about Alabama's head coach.
Nick Saban.
Nick Saban was a flounder in the NFL. He was a bad head coach, but he goes to college and he's one of the greatest college head coaches of all time.
Yeah.
So
we'll see. We'll see about Cliff Kingsbury. I think it's a big possibility that he could come out and I think that I have them at an 8-8 season right now. It could be a 10-6 season. It all just depends. It all just depends on if their speed could be a factor. But I think Cliff Kingsbury has a lot to prove this season, and I think even if Cliff Kingsbury gets an 8-8 season or maybe a 9-7 season, I think that's a huge sign that Arizona may have a good combination on their hands, because their schedule this year is pretty tough, mainly because their division is pretty stacked. But they get some outside division games that are just not the best for them.
Yeah.
So best matchups
so
for them.
We'll move to overall here before we kind of give the recap of everything.
Yeah.
So I have San Francisco at number 1 overall. It seems here that you have Seattle.
So I have
So I know that you had Seattle and San Francisco actually finishing both 11-5 when we talked about our schedule, where I had 12-4 to 10-6. So I see a clear gap here to me between San Francisco and Seattle in terms of that total roster. Obviously, Russell Wilson and that receiving group is fun and exciting, and Pete Carroll's been a good head coach. But I mean, I do see a clear gap in talent here to me overall, and I don't think there's a question about San Francisco being the best team in the division.
I think if one team is there to put a knife in that plan, it's Seattle, and I think Seattle's schedule helps them quite a bit. I think Seattle's schedule is, I would say, on the easier side. I wouldn't say it's very easy, but I would say their biggest games are against the 49ers. So they have 2 games against the 49ers, a Cowboys team that could upset them, maybe Minnesota, maybe Buffalo, maybe the Eagles. But that's it. That like outside of the division, they don't really have, I would say, real stiff competition this year. So they could, make it a 13-3 season and take the division out from underneath San Francisco.
That's not even remotely close to me in a possible ending to me.
Yeah, I understand. You have them at 12-4, and you have Seattle at 10-6. But I would say that Seattle is always the one to stick a thorn in San Francisco or LA's side, whoever is going to be the number 1 seed, and they can take that seed away from them. And I think San Fran will still, retain the number 1 seed, but you just never know.
No, that's true. I mean, we'll see what the Super Bowl loss does. I think that's the biggest cloud over this head.
I agree.
We disagreed, it seems like, a bit here. I know when we talked about AFC West, we disagreed about Denver and the Chargers.
Yeah.
But, we seem to kind of be a little all over the place. I have San Francisco as the number 1 team, Seattle is number 2, Arizona is number 3, and LA Rams as the 4th overall team. Not even the schedule, just as the whole for these kind of rankings as a unit. So, I think the Rams field a lot of question marks. I think Arizona has some big plays, but I think that's distracted from some of their big needs. I think Seattle is pretty much fielding a similar team they did last year, which was a good-looking unit. And San Francisco looks to be as dominant, if not more.
Yeah, I would say that the only reason we really disagree here on the Rams and Arizona's records is I think we only differ by 1 game with Arizona. You have them 9-7. I have them at 8-8. I think it's really like there are many toss-up games for Arizona this year. I think their squad lines up well with quite a few teams where they can eke out a victory to make it that 9-7 season. I also feel like I did give some respect to the Rams that maybe they don't deserve this season in a few games that propelled them to that 9-7 mark. I could definitely see them hitting that 6-10 mark though. I won't disagree with that. I just think that they win those toss-up games. I think McVay's too smart to win those to lose those toss-up games. Especially like maybe ones in the division. I think he's just a little too smart to lose those. But we will see. It could very well happen because their talent has been stripped away from that team slowly but surely since the Super Bowl. So I think this division, like I said on the last show when we were talking about their records. I think this division is one of the most volatile in the fact that any of the teams can screw it up for any of the other teams, and their playoff chances or their seeding. I think this is one of the most competitive divisions outside of the AFC North. I think AFC North is very, very competitive, just like this one is. So yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a
good season for this division in particular.
Yeah. So real quick before we do our quick recap and sign off, breaking news via Adam Schefter, the NFL's Wojak, also #free Wojak.
Wojak.
The Titans and running back Derrick Henry have agreed to a 4-year, $50 million contract that includes $25.5 million guaranteed. So Derrick Henry is not moving on anytime soon. Do with that information as you will.
I mean, both him and the number 1 quarterback in the league got their money this year. And I'm not talking about Patrick Mahomes. I'm talking about Ryan Tannehill. He is the true GOAT.
All right. We'll save that for the NFC or AFC South. So we'll get into the recap here real quick, and then we will let you all go. So at quarterback, the only one we completely 100% agreed on at the get-go, we both have Seattle, San Francisco, Arizona, and LA, respectively in that order. Wide receivers, we disagree. We both start Arizona. I then had the Los Angeles Rams, Seattle Seahawks, and San Francisco At the bottom, Carl, why don't you share with the people?
Yeah, I had Arizona at 1, just like Sam did. I had Seattle at number 2 because I think their wide receiving core is phenomenal. I think San Francisco is a good 3rd. I just think their wide receiving core, if not, if they don't have the names that you recognize now, you'll recognize their names by the end of the season. They're just really good at putting wide receivers through that system. And then I had LA last, just because Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are good. I just don't think that they'll propel their team to a lot of victories this year.
Yeah. So then at tight end, I have San Francisco. Skipping running back. At running back, we both agreed San Francisco 49ers, Seattle, Arizona, and LA. After some debate and change, we moved there. Moving on to tight end, I had San Francisco, LA, Seattle, and Arizona.
And we both agree on George Kittle being number 1. But I have Seattle at number 2, just because I think their tight end core is really good. LA is like a 2.5. I think it's really close toss up between Seattle and LA, just for their tight end core. But then Arizona is obviously last. They don't really have a big tight end to speak of. Max Williams with 2 X's. We'll see. We'll see what he can do this season, but I think those will stay just as they are.
Yeah, and then so moving to the big boys on the O-line, we agreed here after some debate. We had San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, and then Arizona. That rounds out our offense. So moving to the big D, on the defensive line, we almost agreed here. We had San Francisco, LA, and then I had Arizona. Or no, we do agree completely on the defensive line. That's my
agree on this one.
I might be illiterate some days. So we had San Francisco, LA, Arizona, and Seattle. Linebackers is where we disagreed a little. I had Arizona, Seattle, San Francisco, and LA.
I had Seattle, then Arizona, then San Francisco, then LA.
And then the big debate we had here was the defensive backs, which is comprised of cornerback, safeties. You guys know this. I had Seattle, LA, San Francisco, and Arizona.
And I had Seattle, Arizona, San Francisco, and LA.
Yeah, and then so finishing it all off, coaches, we agreed Pete Carroll at number 1. I had Sean McVay for the Rams, Shanahan for the Niners, and Cliff Kingsbury for the Cardinals.
And I had Pete Carroll number 1. I think Shanahan is the hotter hand right now, so I had him number 2. McVay is in a rebuilding year, so I just don't see a lot of things happening for him this season, but I still think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. I'd have him at 3. And then Cliff Kingsbury is on a climb right now, and I think we might see some big things out of him this year.
Yeah, and then so to put the creme de la creme, the cherry on top, the overall rankings, I had San Francisco at 1, Seattle Seahawks at 2, Arizona Cardinals at 3, and the LA Rams at 4.
Yeah, and we agreed on the top 2. I think San Fran will eke out the NFC West victory here if Seattle can. If Seattle sticks to my predictions here. So I have San Fran, I have Seattle, I have LA, and then Arizona. LA could quite possibly go from 9-7 to 6-10. It's just a lot of toss-up games that I gave them the edge in just because of their coach.
Yeah. All right. I think that about does it for today.
All righty. We will see you guys next time when we talk about the AFC North. Ooh. This is going to be a fun one. I'm excited for it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys. We will see you next time. Make sure to join us on the next Pooch Cake podcast, and we thank you guys for listening. All right, you guys
stay safe.
Stay safe out there.